When the right has to finally reckon with the disaster of climate change, they'll go all eco-fascist, almost certainly. The problem is that the actual kind of the economic right rather than the cultural right, their belief in fossil fuels and not doing anything about climate change is essentially entirely because of the support for free markets, because climate change as a concept undermines the principle of free market capitalism, because pollution and climate change as a thing is born out of the negative externalities of market transaction. If you're a libertarian type, if you're a praxeologist, if you're like an Austrian economist, then you don't even believe that negative externalities can exist. You don't think that negative externalities are something worth worrying about, because the single heuristic that you have for successful economics is, does the market clear or not? Do we have a cleared market? If we do, it doesn't matter about the fact that there are entities outside of the market transactions that will see negative externalities, because anything that you do to mitigate that negative externality is undermining the efficiency of the market being cleared. So you can't believe in climate change, right? It's existentially undermining of your political and economic ideology as a libertarian, as a right-winger, as a Rothbardian type about your economic ideology, to admit that climate change is bad. Otherwise, it undermines everything that you believe. Because suddenly you have to, in one moment, understand the concept of negative externalities. And not just any negative externality, not just a small negative externality, the negative externality that you have ignored, and ignored for a century, almost, right? The industrial period of the world over the last century, for example, and for the lion's share of that, we've known that climate change is a problem and that pollution is a problem. You will have been the people to be the handmaiden of the destruction that will cause, that climate change will cause. So you can't, right? It is existentially problematic as a right-winger, as a libertarian, to accept the problems of climate change, because once you do, your ideology has been essentially the driving force behind the apocalypse, and you can't. It's literally, it's impossible. Like you have to have cognitive distance to ignore this stuff. I think it's that they know but they don't care. Is that they have tried to they ignore it deliberately. It's see no evil, hear no evil, right? That's what the libertarians like with climate change. Like, whether or not they can see it or whether they believe it happening or is irrelevant, because they convince themselves that it's not a problem, because they have to make sure their ideology is functional. Because liberal conservatives, they can absolutely believe in climate change, because they're not like Rothbardians, you know. They may be Burkean conservatives, they may have horrible opinions on hierarchy, right? But they're not free market fundamentalists in the way that libertarians and Rothbardians are. So they can at least understand the concept of a negative externality, even if they think that the level to which a government has to intervene to mitigate that externality should be as light touch as possible, you know? And certainly not owning anything, it would just be slightly regulating, a liberal conservative, you know? But a Rothbardian, a libertarian, like a real, like, proper Austrian economics right-winger type, they literally cannot even for a moment consider that climate change is a problem, otherwise they have to give up their ideology. Not a problem, not an issue, never going to be an issue, and it's basically their opinion, right? And that's it, right? Their answer to the negative externality of climate change is that, well, this will create the demand for products that solve the problem, therefore the market will solve the problem eventually. Except, how much damage will that do before that happens, if it even does happen, you know? More than likely, instead of having people innovating to solve the problem within the market, you'll have people out there exploiting the problems that come from the negative externality. It is basically a religion, you know, praxeology and Austrian economics. That might be a good segment, that. Why right-wingers can't believe in climate change. The invisible hand will slap climate change out of the way. It's basically what they think. It's literally what they think, you know? And instead you'll just have profit seekers exploiting the crises. That's it. That's what's interesting, right? It's that a liberal conservative solution to climate change is carbon credits, you know? That's a liberal conservative, you know, market-driven solution to climate change, right? Like, so the government is doing something. The government is creating a system with which to mitigate climate change, but they've done it through a market mechanism, you know? They can't countenance the idea that you just impose a regulation or the state does a thing by powering out a certain kind of policy through state funding or ownership or direction, you know? They can't countenance the state doing something because the government doing something is communist. But what they can countenance is the government creating a system that has a market mechanism that allows people to be able to get benefits out of mitigating climate change, right? That's the reason why we have, you know, carbon credits, is because it's a market-driven solution. And in a post-1991 world, or post-dissolution of the Soviet Union world, a post-New Labour world, everything is markets, right? Neoliberalism has won. So markets are the only way that we can conceive of policy. In the same way that we had an internal market in the NHS and league tables for schools, right? We have to compete to get the best outcome, So you introduce carbon credits, and there is now a market with which people can talk about how they're mitigating climate change. Because, we can't have the state do something. Socialism. If we don't seriously fix inequality in society, then it's the rich, the ones who have fueled climate change, that will be the ones the best off, as they'll be able to afford the food and security in the world that they have caused. That's probably why the rich typically are against climate action, because they know they can make it through the storm. I mean, there is definitely like an effective altruist sector of the rich who believe that they can be the ones who can profit out of the climate change solution, who want to engage in it for brownie points with the public. Remember when we were watching Christine Jardine on LBC talking about the difference between the old billionaires who had a social conscience versus the new billionaires who are bad because all they care about is money? That's that kind of distinction there, where the richest billionaires who have a social conscience will try and make money out of climate change whilst at least admitting it's a problem. And then the real kind of Machiavellian and misanthropic billionaires who don't even have a social conscience will still just want to make money out of fossil fuels for as long as they can do, no matter the external consequences, right? Obviously, what none of these people will want, what all of these people share, regardless of their opinions on climate change, is the desire to be rich. Because you've got to remember, right, is that the rich people who have a social conscience, they do it to mitigate the fact that if they didn't do it, there'd be a revolution, That's the thing, There's a really great Zizek article called "No One Has to Be Evil," and it's about the World Economic Forum. It's about the rich people who go to the World Economic Forum. They go there to fix the problems that they've caused, So at the World Economic Forum every year, you'll hear them talk about how bad climate change is, how bad third world poverty is. They'll talk about how bad the state of our countries are and all of these different ecological and social problems, They'll come together and they won't realise that they're the problem. So what the World Economic Forum is, as an institution, it's there for all of these rich people, all these corporations, all of these super rich billionaire types to get together, agree that the problems that they've caused are a problem, and then find ways to solve them that don't impact them politically or economically. That's the issue, because the actual solution is to get rid of these people's wealth and power, but they can't countenance that, so they have to find an alternative way of doing that, Exactly, there will always be altruistic and malevolent people. The issue is the system itself, not the people occupying it. You're exactly right. Like, the altruistic billionaires, they have convinced themselves they are not the problem, and that they are also the solution, right? That's where their problem lies, because they can't accept that the system that made them rich is the reason why everyone else is poor. They cannot accept that the system that got them rich is the one that's destroying humanity and the planet, They can't accept these things, because to accept it would make them the enemy and them the bad person. So they have to create the situations that give them the sharp relief of knowing that they can solve the problems. That's why they create these institutions like the World Economic Forum, because it gives them an out. It gives them an excuse that they are trying to fix things, when of course, if they recognize they're the problem, their ideology would break apart. In the very same way that the libertarian types were not altruistic and are malevolent, can't admit that climate change is a problem, because it would undermine their ideology that they're the problem. Elon used to pretend to have an ethical core. Yeah, that's what's interesting about Elon Musk, is he's moved from one group to the other group, right? Altruistic billionaires is an oxymoron. You don't amass that kind of wealth without standing on people's necks, but they don't think that they're standing on people's necks, right? In their mind, they have gotten to where they are because the market has decreed it as such, and they are very special, very, very special kids, right? Incredibly special children that have got them to the wealth that they have. They don't view it as exploitation. They don't view it as surplus value extraction, right? Because of course they couldn't, otherwise they'd know they were evil, right? But what they do understand is that bad things are bad. They have at least got a social conscience to understand that poverty is bad, climate change is bad, all these things. They just can't accept that the exploitation of capitalism that made them rich, that has created these bad things. So they have to find a reason to why they can be the solution, which is where effective altruism comes from as a concept. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.